Alejandro Bosques knelt in the filthy streets of Mexico City's Centro Histórico, his $1,000 suit soaking up gutter water as he begged the homeless girl who haunted his nightmares to marry him, unaware that her shocking response would expose a truth so devastating it would destroy everything he thought he knew about love, family, and the price of redemption. The morning smog hung over Mexico City like a shroud of broken dreams, thick enough to taste the desperation of 8 million souls struggling to survive in one of the world's largest urban sprawls. From his penthouse office atop Torre Corporativo in Polanco, Alejandro Bosques could see it all. The gleaming shopping centers of Santa Fe where the wealthy spent more on lunch than most families earned in a month, and beyond that, the endless sprawl of colonias where hope went to die. At 35, he commanded an empire worth over 2 billion pesos, built on luxury developments that transformed Mexico City's skyline. His name graced buildings across the Federal District, and his face regularly appeared in Quien and Ola magazines as one of Mexico's most eligible bachelors. Yet as he stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, Alejandro felt like a man drowning in silk. Señor Bosques, his assistant Esperanza called from the doorway, her voice carrying the formal distance that money always created between people. Your mother is here for the monthly lunch. Shall I show her in? Alejandro's jaw tightened. Dona Carmen Bosques entered like a force of nature, her designer dress and perfectly coiffed silver hair announcing her status as Mexico City's premier socialite. At 62, she still possessed the regal bearing that had made her a legendary beauty in her youth, but her eyes held the cold calculation of a woman who viewed love as a business transaction. Mijo, she said, air-kissing both his cheeks with practiced affection, you look tired. Too much work, not enough of the right kind of companionship. Buenos dias, mamá, he replied, gesturing toward the sitting area where lunch had been elegantly arranged. And before you ask, no, I haven't reconsidered your friend's daughter from Monterrey. Carmen settled into her chair with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to being served. Paloma Herrera is perfect for you. Educated at Swiss boarding schools, fluent in 4 languages, comes from excellent bloodlines. Bloodlines. Alejandro couldn't keep the bitter laugh from escaping. We're not breeding horses, Mama. No, we're building dynasties, she replied sharply, her fork pausing over the exotic salad. The Bosques name deserves to continue with someone worthy, someone who understands our world, our responsibilities. Our responsibilities. The phrase made his chest tighten with familiar suffocation. Since his father's death 10 years ago, Alejandro had shouldered not just the family business, but the weight of his mother's ambitions. Every woman she introduced was vetted like a corporate acquisition: bloodline, education, social connections, childbearing potential. Love was never part of the equation. I won't marry someone just because she looks good in Ola magazine, he said quietly. Carmen's perfectly painted lips pursed with disapproval. Romance is for telenovelas, Alejandro. Marriage is about building something lasting, something meaningful. Do you want to end up like your cousin Raul? 38, unmarried, wasting his life on actresses and models who drain his bank account. Have you ever felt trapped by others' expectations for your life? What would you sacrifice to find authentic love? Share your thoughts below. The argument was interrupted by a soft knock. Esperanza appeared, looking apologetic. Pardon, Señor Bosques, but there's a situation downstairs. Security says there's a homeless girl causing problems near the main entrance. She's asking for you specifically. Alejandro frowned. For me? By name. Sigh, Señor. She says she knows you, that you promised her something. Security wants to call the police, but I thought you should know first. Through the window, Alejandro could see the small crowd gathering around the building's gleaming entrance 40 floors below. Even from this height, he could make out the security guards in their crisp uniforms forming a barrier around a tiny figure in ragged clothes. Handle it, mijo, Carmen said dismissively, returning to her lunch. These people, they see wealth and they create fantasies. Probably saw your photo in a magazine and imagined some connection. But something about Esperanza's expression made Alejandro hesitate. What did she look like? Young, maybe 20. Dark hair, very thin. She. Esperanza paused, choosing her words carefully. She had your eyes, Señor. The same green eyes. The fork slipped from Alejandro's fingers, clattering against his plate. Those words hit him like a physical blow, dragging up memories he'd spent 15 years trying to bury. Green eyes. Just like his. Just like his father's. Just like... No, he whispered, the word barely audible. Carmen looked up sharply. Alejandro? What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. He was already moving toward the elevator, his mind racing back 15 years to a night that had changed everything. A 17-year-old girl named Isabella Montenegro. 3 months of secret meetings. One terrible mistake. And a choice his mother had forced him to make, a choice that had haunted every relationship since. Sir, should I call building security? Esperanza called after him. No, Alejandro said, his voice hoarse. I'm going down there myself. The elevator descent felt eternal, each floor taking him deeper into a past he tried to escape. 40 floors. 30. 20. With each passing level, the weight of possibility and dread grew heavier in his chest. Could it be? After all these years, could she have found him? The elevator opened onto the marble lobby, where his security team stood in a protective semicircle. Through the glass doors, he could see her, a small figure surrounded by the chaos of one of Mexico City's busiest financial districts. Even from behind, even through 15 years of changes, he recognized something in the way she held herself. Senor Bosques, the head of security, approached. We can have her removed immediately. She's clearly disturbed, claiming to be. Let me through, Alejandro said quietly. He pushed through the glass doors and stepped onto the sidewalk, where the sounds and smells of the city hit him like a wall. Exhaust fumes, street food, the desperation of millions of people fighting for survival. And there, in the middle of it all, stood a young woman who made his world stop spinning. She was thin, too thin, with hollow cheeks that spoke of missed meals and rough nights. Her clothes were layers of mismatched fabric, clearly gathered from charity bins or worse. Her dark hair hung in tangled waves around shoulders that curved inward, as if she were trying to make herself smaller, invisible. But when she turned to face him, Alejandro's breath caught in his throat. She had his eyes. Exactly his eyes. The same unusual shade of green that had marked the Bosques bloodline for generations. And in those eyes, he saw not just recognition, but a pain so deep it made his chest ache. Hello, Papa, she said quietly, her voice carrying the strength of someone who had survived things no 20-year-old should endure. The words hit him like a physical blow. Around them, the noise of traffic and pedestrians faded to nothing. Security guards, onlookers, the entire world seemed to pause as the truth he'd spent 15 years running from stood before him in flesh and blood. Alejandro Bosques, millionaire developer, master of his universe, fell to his knees on the dirty sidewalk as the daughter he'd never acknowledged looked down at him with eyes that held his entire shameful history. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as Alejandro knelt on the concrete, staring up at the daughter he'd spent 15 years pretending didn't exist. Around them, Mexico City's relentless pulse continued, horns honking, vendors calling out their wares, the endless stream of people rushing past. But for him, everything had crystallized into this single, devastating moment. Sophia, he whispered, the name falling from his lips like a prayer he'd forgotten he knew how to say. She didn't flinch at the sound of her name, though something flickered in those achingly familiar green eyes. You remember. Every day, he said, his voice breaking. Every single day for 15 years. The crowd of onlookers was growing, phones appearing to capture the spectacle of one of Mexico's most powerful men kneeling before a homeless girl. His security team shifted nervously, unsure whether to intervene or maintain their protective perimeter. Sophia glanced at the gathering crowd, then backed down at him. Get up, Senor Bosques. You're making a scene. The formal address cut deeper than any accusation could have. He was no longer Papa, he was Senor Bosques, a stranger who happened to share her DNA. Alejandro rose unsteadily to his feet, his expensive suit wrinkled and stained from the dirty sidewalk. We need to talk. Please. Somewhere private. There's nothing private about what you did to my mother, Sophia replied, her voice carrying a strength that reminded him painfully of Isabella. But if you insist, there's a cafe around the corner. Café Luna. I know the owner. She lets me clean tables for food sometimes. The casual mention of working for meals hit him like a slap. While he'd been dining on imported delicacies in his penthouse, his daughter had been scrubbing tables for scraps. 10 minutes later, they sat across from each other in a cramped cafe that smelled of strong coffee and fried masa. The other patrons, construction workers, street vendors, office clerks on their lunch breaks, paid them no attention. Here, In this world of working-class Mexico City, his wealth meant nothing. Sofia wrapped her thin fingers around a chipped ceramic mug of Café de Olla, the cinnamon-spiced coffee steaming between them like an offering of warmth she desperately needed. Up close, Alejandro could see the toll that street life had taken, the premature lines around her eyes, the way she unconsciously guarded her food, the hypervigilance of someone who'd learned that safety was always temporary. "Tell me about your mother," he said quietly. "Tell me about Isabella." A shadow passed over Sofia's face. "She died when I was 12. Tuberculosis. Could have been treated if we'd had money for proper medicine, but..." She shrugged with the practiced indifference of someone who'd learned that bitter truths were easier to swallow than sweet lies. The words hit him like a physical blow. Isabella was dead. Had been dead for 8 years, while he'd been building his empire and attending charity galas and pretending that the girl he'd loved at 17 had never existed. "She never told me she was sick," Sofia continued, stirring her coffee with mechanical precision. "Said she didn't want to worry me. Worked 3 jobs until the very end, trying to keep us in our little room in Doctors. When she died, the landlord threw me out. I've been on the streets ever since." Alejandro's hands trembled as he reached across the table, but Sofia pulled back before he could touch her. The rejection stung, but he understood it. What right did he have to comfort when he'd caused the very pain he was trying to soothe? "I tried to find you both," he said desperately. "After I graduated university, after I had my own money, I hired investigators." "No, you didn't." Her voice was flat, matter-of-fact. "My mother told me the truth before she died. About how your mother came to see her when she was pregnant. About the money she offered. About the choice you made." The memory crashed over him like a wave. He was 20 again, standing in his mother's sitting room while Carmen laid out the ultimatum with surgical precision. Marry Palomar Herrera as planned, inherit the business, secure the family legacy, or throw it all away for a pregnant teenager from the colonias. The choice between duty and love, between everything he'd been raised to be and everything his heart wanted. He'd chosen duty. God help him, he'd chosen duty. What would you do if you had to choose between family loyalty and the person you love? Have you ever made a decision that haunted you for years? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Welcome back, my incredible viewers. Your comments from the last video have been absolutely overwhelming. I can see how deeply you're all connecting with the story, and the theories you've been sharing are absolutely brilliant. Some of you are surprisingly close to the truth of what's coming next. But before we continue, don't forget to smash that like button if you're enjoying what you're seeing. Your support means the world to me and helps this channel grow. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss any of our uploads. We're building an amazing community here, and I don't want you to miss out on what's coming. And please, share this video with your friends, family, or anyone who would love this type of content. The more people we can bring into this community, the better it gets for everyone. Your engagement in the comments has been incredible, and I love reading every single one of your thoughts and theories. Keep them coming. Now, let's go in depth into the story. "I was young," he whispered. "Scared. My mother said it was best for everyone, that Isabella would be better off without." Without what? Without a father for her child? Without money to pay for food and medicine and a decent place to live? Sofia's composure finally cracked, tears she'd probably held back for years spilling down her hollow cheeks. "Do you know what it's like to watch your mother die because she can't afford antibiotics? To sleep in doorways and eat from garbage cans while your father lives in a palace?" Each word was a knife to his chest, but he deserved every cut. "I can fix this," he said suddenly, the words tumbling out in desperate rush. "I have money, influence, connections. I can give you everything, a house, education, the finest doctors if you're sick, anything you want. I can make up for lost time." Sofia stared at him with those devastating green eyes, and for a moment, he thought he saw hope flicker there. Then she laughed, a sound so bitter it made him flinch. "You think you can buy forgiveness? I think I can try to do what's right. Finally." He leaned forward, his voice urgent. "Move in with me. Let me take care of you. I have a penthouse with 5 bedrooms, servants, anything you could." "And what would people say?" she interrupted. "What would your precious society friends think about Alejandro Bosquez's homeless daughter? What would your mother say?" The question hung in the air between them, and his silence was answer enough. "I thought so." She stood to leave, and panic seized him. She'd found him after 15 years, given him this impossible second chance, and he was about to lose her again through his own cowardice. "Wait," he called out, desperation making his voice crack. "Please. Don't go. Not again." She paused at the cafe door, her back to him. "Marry me," he said suddenly, the words shocking even himself. Sophia turned around slowly, her expression unreadable. "What did you say?" "Marry me." He stood, his heart hammering against his ribs. "If I marry you, legally adopt you as my wife instead of acknowledging you as my daughter, no one will question why I'm supporting you. You'll have my name, my protection, access to everything I own." The cafe fell silent. Even the owner stopped wiping down tables to stare at this impossible scene, a millionaire proposing marriage to a homeless girl. "You want to marry your own daughter to hide the shame of having abandoned her," Sophia said slowly, as if testing the words for their full horror. "I want to save you. The only way I can think of that won't destroy both our lives," he replied, hating himself for the truth of it. "It would be a marriage in name only, a legal fiction to protect us both." For a long moment, Sophia studied his face. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled, not with warmth, but with the sharp edge of someone who'd just found the perfect weapon. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll marry you, Papa. But I have one condition." Relief flooded through him. "Anything. Name it. I want you to publicly acknowledge me as your daughter first. Before the wedding, before the legal papers, before anything else." Her smile grew sharper, more dangerous. "I want you to tell the world exactly who I am and exactly what you did to my mother. I want your confession printed in every newspaper, broadcast on every television station. I want the whole country to know that Alejandro Bosques abandoned his pregnant teenage girlfriend and let his daughter live on the streets for 8 years." The words hit him like a sledgehammer. She wasn't asking for money or comfort or security. She was asking for the one thing that would destroy everything he'd built, the complete and utter annihilation of his reputation, his social standing, his mother's carefully constructed dynasty. She was asking for justice. The silence in Café Luna stretched like a taut wire, threatening to snap under the weight of Sophia's ultimatum. Around them, the ordinary sounds of Mexico City life continued, the hiss of the espresso machine, the scrape of chairs against worn tile floors, the distant rumble of traffic on each central. But for Alejandro, the world had narrowed to those merciless green eyes that held his entire future hostage. "You're asking me to commit social suicide," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm asking you to tell the truth," Sophia replied, stirring her coffee with mechanical precision. "Something you should have done 15 years ago." Alejandro's phone buzzed insistently in his pocket, probably his mother wondering where he disappeared to, probably board members needing decisions on million-peso deals, probably the entire apparatus of his carefully constructed life demanding his attention. He ignored it all. "You don't understand what this would mean," he said desperately. "The business partners who would flee, the investors who would pull out, the developments that would collapse. Thousands of people depend on my company for their livelihoods. And one person, your daughter, depended on you for her life," Sophia shot back. "How did that work out for her?" The words hit like a physical blow. She was right, devastatingly right, and they both knew it. "My mother will never survive the scandal," he tried a different approach. "She's 62, her entire identity is built around our family's reputation. The shame could literally kill her." Sophia's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Your mother's reputation was built on the grave of mine. She paid my pregnant mother to disappear, threatened her with lawyers if she ever contacted you again. Do you want to know what Isabella told me before she died? That she loved you so much she was willing to vanish rather than destroy your future." Each revelation was like a knife twisting deeper into his chest. "I didn't know about the threats. I swear on my father's grave, I didn't know. But you knew about the money. It wasn't a question. You knew your mother paid her to disappear, and you let it happen because it was easier than fighting for what you claimed to love." Alejandro closed his eyes, seeing Isabella's face as clearly as if 15 years hadn't passed. 17 years old, dark hair cascading over shoulders that shook when she cried, telling him through tears that it was better this way, that she didn't want to hold him back from his destiny. He'd been so relieved, God help him, he'd been relieved, that the choice was being taken out of his hands. "What if I give you everything without the public confession?" he asked, grasping at straws. "Money, property, education, healthcare, everything you could ever want, but privately. We could say you're my ward, or a distant cousin, or you could keep lying to protect your precious reputation while I keep my mouth shut like a good little secret. Sophia's voice carried the bitter wisdom of someone who'd learned that silence was just another form of imprisonment. No. I spent 8 years invisible, pretending I didn't exist because it was convenient for you. Those days are over. His phone buzzed again, more insistently this time. Through the cafe's grimy window, he could see a black SUV pulling up to the curb, his security team, probably sent by his mother to retrieve him from whatever embarrassing situation he'd gotten himself into. I need time to think, he said frantically. It's not a decision I can make in a cafe over coffee. Give me a week, a few days even. Time. Sophia stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I gave you 15 years. My mother gave you 9 months while she carried your child and worked 2 jobs to pay for vitamins she couldn't afford. How much more time do you need to figure out whether your daughter is worth more than your stock portfolio? The security men were getting out of the SUV now, their earpieces and dark suits marking them as obviously out of place in this working-class neighborhood. Soon they would come inside, would escort him back to his tower where his mother would demand explanations and his assistant would reschedule the meetings he'd abandoned. Where are you staying? He asked urgently. How can I find you? Sophia's smile was cold. I'm not staying anywhere, Papa. I live on the streets, remember? But don't worry, you'll know where to find me. Tomorrow morning, I'll be on the steps of the cathedral. The day after that, outside your corporate headquarters. The day after that, at your country club in Tecamacalco. I'll keep showing up, keep being visible, until you decide whether you're finally ready to see me. The threat was clear. She wouldn't disappear quietly this time. She would be a constant, living reminder of his choices, haunting him in every space where his wealth and status were supposed to protect him from uncomfortable truths. Sophia, please. But she was already walking away, weaving through the crowded cafe with the practiced invisibility of someone who'd learned to move through the world without being noticed. At the door, she paused and looked back at him one last time. You have 48 hours, she said quietly. After that, I start telling my story to anyone who will listen. With or without your cooperation. Then she was gone, disappearing into the human river that flowed constantly through Mexico City's streets, leaving Alejandro alone with the bitter taste of Café de Olla and the growing certainty that his carefully constructed world was about to collapse. Have you ever been forced to choose between what's right and what's safe? What would you sacrifice to save someone you love, even if it meant losing everything else? Share your thoughts below. The security men entered the cafe just as his phone rang. His mother's name flashed on the screen, and he knew that this call would be the first domino in a chain reaction that would determine not just his fate, but his daughter's as well. Alejandro, where are you? Carmen's voice was sharp with irritation. You disappeared from lunch. Esperanza says there was some incident with a homeless person, and now I find out you're sitting in some terrible cafe in Centro instead of attending the board meeting that's been scheduled for weeks. Mama, I need to tell you something. What you need to do is get back here immediately. The Herrera family is flying in from Monterrey tonight specifically to discuss the engagement announcement. Palomar's father wants to finalize the prenuptial agreements, and you're sitting in a cafe looking like you've been wrestling with street dogs. The mention of Palomar Herrera, blonde, beautiful, perfectly acceptable, everything his mother had chosen for him, felt like a slap. How could he even think about marrying another woman when his daughter was sleeping in doorways? The engagement is off, he heard himself saying. Silence. Then, in a voice like ice cracking, what did you say? I said the engagement is off. I'm not marrying Paloma. I'm not marrying anyone you choose for me. Not anymore. Alejandro Sebastian Bosques Morales, you'll get in that car and come home this instant. We will discuss this hysteria in private, like civilized people. The use of his full name, something she only did when he was a child being disciplined, almost made him flinch. Almost. But then he thought of Sophia's hollow cheeks, of Isabella dying alone in a charity hospital, of 8 years of choosing comfort over conscience. No, Mama. For once in my life, I'm going to do what's right instead of what's convenient. He hung up the phone, knowing that he'd just declared war on the only family he'd ever acknowledged. Through the cafe window, he could see his security team looking increasingly agitated, probably receiving urgent instructions to retrieve him by any means necessary. But for the first time in 15 years, Alejandro Bosques felt something he'd almost forgotten existed, the possibility of redemption. The question was whether he was brave enough to pay its price. That night, alone in his penthouse while his mother's calls went unanswered, Alejandro stood before the same window where he'd contemplated his empire just that morning. The city spread out below him in all its complex beauty, the gleaming towers of Santa Fe, the crowded neighborhoods of the periphery, the ancient heart of the Centro Historico where his daughter was sleeping rough under some bridge or in some doorway. Somewhere out there, Sofia was cold, hungry, alone. His daughter. His flesh and blood. The child he'd abandoned for the very view he was looking at now. In his hand, he held the business card of Mexico's most prominent investigative journalist, a woman known for her devastating exposés of corruption, hypocrisy, and the hidden crimes of the powerful. One phone call, and his confession would be tomorrow's headline in every major newspaper in the country. One phone call, and everything he'd built would crumble. One phone call, and his daughter would finally have justice. The card felt heavier than all the gold in his vaults, all the properties in his portfolio, all the power he'd accumulated over 15 years of choosing ambition over love. His finger hovered over the numbers, and for the first time since he was 20 years old, Alejandro Bosques had to decide who he really was, the man his mother had shaped him to be, or the man his daughter needed him to become. Alejandro's eyes snapped open in his penthouse bedroom as his phone shattered the pre-dawn silence. For a moment, he was disoriented. He'd fallen asleep fully clothed on his couch, the journalist's business card still clutched in his hand, the weight of his impossible choice pressing down on his chest like a stone. Señor Bosques, his night security supervisor's voice was tight with urgency. There's been an incident. It's about the girl. The homeless girl from yesterday. She's in the hospital. Alejandro's blood turned to ice. What happened? Accident. Hit and run in Doctors, near where she was sleeping. Witnesses say she was crossing the street around midnight when a car. Senor, it doesn't look good. She's at Hospital General, in critical condition. The phone slipped from Alejandro's fingers as the room tilted around him. Sofia. His daughter. Lying broken in a public hospital while he'd spent the night agonizing over his reputation instead of looking for her, protecting her, being the father he should have been from the beginning. 20 minutes later, he burst through the doors of Hospital General, a sprawling public medical complex that served Mexico City's poor with overcrowded wards, overworked staff, and underfunded equipment. The smell hit him immediately, disinfectant struggling to mask the deeper odors of human suffering, fear, and institutional neglect. I'm looking for Sofia Montenegro, he told the harried nurse at the emergency desk. She was brought in last night, hit-and-run victim. Are you family? The nurse asked without looking up from her paperwork. The question stopped him cold. Was he family? He'd spent 15 years pretending she didn't exist, had known her for exactly one day, had never legally acknowledged her existence. By every definition that mattered, love, presence, sacrifice, he had no claim to the title of father. Yes, he said quietly. I'm her father. The words felt strange on his tongue, but also somehow right. Like a key finally turning in a lock that had been rusted shut for too long. 3rd floor, intensive care. But visiting hours don't start until. I need to see her now. Something in his voice, desperation, authority, or simple human pain, made the nurse look up. She studied his face for a moment, then nodded. Elevators broken. Stairs are to your left. Alejandro took the concrete steps 3 at a time, his expensive shoes echoing in the sterile stairwell. 3rd floor. ICU. The signs were in Spanish and English, directing him through corridors that felt like a maze of human misery. Finally, he found her room. Through the small window, he could see her lying motionless on a narrow hospital bed, connected to machines that beeped and hummed with mechanical precision. Her face was swollen almost beyond recognition, bandages covering most of her head, tubes and wires creating a web of life support around her frail body. Excuse me, a voice said behind him. Alejandro turned to see a middle-aged doctor in a white coat that had seen better days. You're the father. Yes. Dr. Herrera. Dr. Patricia Herrera. She studied her clipboard with the exhausted expression of someone who delivered too much bad news. Your daughter has suffered severe trauma. Fractured skull, internal bleeding, broken ribs. We've stabilized her for now, but... She paused, choosing her words carefully. The next 48 hours are critical. She needs surgery, but... But what? Do whatever needs to be done. Money is no object. Dr. Herrera looked up at him sharply. Money? Senor, this is a public hospital. We treat everyone the same, regardless of their ability to pay. The issue isn't money, it's that she needs a specialist, and our neurosurgeon is currently in surgery with another critical case. She's fourth on the list. Fourth on the list. His daughter was dying by degrees while bureaucratic triage determined her fate. What if I transferred her to a private hospital? Hospital Español, or American British Cadre, they have the best neurosurgeons in the country. She's too unstable to move. Any transport could kill her. Dr. Herrera's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry, senor. I know this isn't what you want to hear, but all we can do now is wait and hope. Wait and hope. After 15 years of abandoning her, after letting her mother die of a treatable disease, after forcing his daughter to live on the streets while he slept in silk sheets, now all he could do was wait and hope. Can I see her? 5 minutes. She's unconscious, but sometimes they can hear us. Alejandro entered the room on unsteady legs. Up close, Sophia looked even more fragile, like a broken bird that had fallen from an impossible height. Her hand, lying motionless on the thin hospital blanket, was small and scarred, the hands of someone who'd fought for survival every day of her adult life. He took her hand in both of his, careful not to disturb the foreline. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice breaking. Mija, I'm so sorry for everything. For abandoning you, for letting your mother die alone, for being a coward when you needed me to be brave. I'm sorry it took almost losing you to realize that nothing, no business, no reputation, no amount of money, matters more than you. The machines continued their electronic vigil, marking each precious heartbeat, each breath that proved she was still fighting. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. Emergency board meeting in 1 hour. Your mother insists you attend. Stock prices falling due to rumors about yesterday's incident. Yesterday's incident. That's how they were already characterizing the first time he'd spoken to his daughter in 15 years. An incident to be managed, contained, spun into something palatable for shareholders. Alejandro looked at Sophia's battered face, then at the phone in his hand, then at the journalist's business card he carried all night like a talisman of possibility. The choice was suddenly crystal clear. He dialed the number. Buenos dias, this is Alejandro Bosques, he said when the journalist answered. I believe we need to talk. I have a story to tell you, and I need it published today. Senor Bosques? The construction magnate? What kind of story? Alejandro squeezed his daughter's hand gently, drawing strength from the warmth that proved she was still alive, still fighting. The story of how I abandoned my pregnant girlfriend 15 years ago because my mother thought she wasn't good enough for our family name. The story of how my daughter, Sofia Montenegro, has been living on the streets for 8 years while I lived in luxury. The story of how she's lying in this hospital bed right now because I was too much of a coward to be her father when she needed me most. Silence on the other end of the line. Are you sure you want to go on record with this? Do you understand what this will mean for your business, your social standing? I understand that my daughter is dying, Alejandro said firmly, and that I've wasted 15 years caring more about appearances than about the people who actually matter. How quickly can you have this story published? If you're serious about this, I can have it online within 2 hours, in tomorrow's print edition. I'm serious. Come to Hospital General. Bring a photographer. I want them to see where Mexico's richest families send their children when they're too ashamed to acknowledge them. As he hung up the phone, Alejandro felt something he hadn't experienced in 15 years. Peace. Not the false peace of wealth and privilege, but the genuine peace that comes from finally doing the right thing, regardless of the cost. He looked down at Sophia's still form and whispered, I'm going to tell them everything, Mija. Every shameful, cowardly detail. And then, when you wake up, and you will wake up, you'll know that your father finally chose you over everything else. Outside the hospital window, Mexico City was waking up to another day. In a few hours, the entire country would wake up to a very different story about one of their most powerful families. By 12:15, Vasqueza Scandalo was trending on Mexican Twitter. By 12:30, the major television networks had picked up the story. By 1 p.m., Alejandro's phone had received 47 calls from board members, investors, and lawyers, all of which he ignored while holding vigil beside his daughter's hospital bed. The headline in El Universal was brutal in its simplicity: Millionaire's homeless daughter, I abandoned her to protect my reputation, says construction magnate. The photograph accompanying the article showed Alejandro in his wrinkled $1,000 suit, sitting beside Sofia's hospital bed, her battered face visible despite the medical equipment. The contrast was devastating: wealth and poverty, privilege and suffering, a father's guilt made manifest in stark black and white. Señor Bosques, Dr. Herrera appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. There's been a development. Alejandro's heart lurched. Is she? No, nothing like that. Her condition is stable. But... The doctor hesitated. Word has gotten out about her case. Dr. Eduardo Martinez from Hospital Angeles, one of the country's best neurosurgeons, has offered to perform the surgery. Pro bono. He's driving over from his private practice right now. Relief flooded through Alejandro like cool water. Thank God. When? Within the hour. Señor, I have to ask, did you arrange this? No. I called no one except the journalist. The realization hit him with surprising force. Other people, they're helping because of the story. Dr. Herrera nodded slowly. The story is everywhere. Social media is exploding with people sharing their own experiences with poverty, with healthcare inequality, with families destroyed by shame. Your confession has, well, it's opened a conversation this country has needed to have for a long time. Through the window, Alejandro could see a crowd gathering in the hospital's parking lot. Not protesters, supporters. People holding signs reading "Justice for Sofia" and "No more invisible children." Street vendors, construction workers, domestic employees, the invisible army of Mexico's working poor, suddenly visible in their solidarity. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Señor Bosques, my daughter died because we couldn't afford her cancer treatment. Thank you for speaking the truth. Maria Gonzalez, Ecatepec. Another, my son lives on the streets because I was ashamed to admit I had him when I was 16. Your courage gives me hope to find him. Anonymous. And another, you lost everything to save your daughter. You're a real man now. Carlos Hernandez, construction worker. The messages kept coming, dozens, then hundreds. People sharing their own stories of shame, abandonment, and the crushing weight of poverty in a country where wealth and status determined not just comfort, but survival itself. Alejandro. The voice from the doorway made him turn. His mother stood there, but she looked smaller somehow, diminished. Her perfect appearance was intact, designer dress, flawless makeup, silver hair styled to perfection, but something in her posture spoke of defeat. Mama, he said quietly, not moving from Sofia's bedside. Carmen approached slowly, her eyes fixed on the unconscious girl. Up close, the family resemblance was unmistakable, the same bone structure, the same stubborn chin, the same green eyes that had marked the Bosques bloodline for generations. She looks like Isabella, Carmen whispered, her voice cracking slightly. And like you, when you were small. Yes. She does. They stood in silence for a moment, 3 generations of Bosques history connected by blood and separated by choices that couldn't be undone. The board voted, Carmen said finally. Unanimous no confidence. You've been removed as CEO. Alejandro nodded without surprise. I expected as much. The Herrera family has withdrawn from all business partnerships. Most of our investors are pulling out. The stock price has dropped 60%. Her voice was clinical, reporting facts like a financial analyst rather than a mother describing her son's ruin. Good, Alejandro said simply. Carmen's carefully controlled composure cracked. Good. Alejandro, do you understand what you've done? 50 years of building this empire, of creating something lasting, of securing our family's legacy, all destroyed for what? For a girl who hates you. For a moment of misguided conscience. For my daughter, he replied, taking Sofia's hand gently. For doing what I should have done 15 years ago. What would you choose? A legacy built on lies or a truth that costs you everything? Have you ever discovered that losing everything was actually the beginning of finding yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments. She may never forgive you, Carmen said, tears finally breaking through her perfect facade. Isabella never forgave me for what I did, and this girl, she has every right to hate us both. Then I'll spend whatever time I have left earning her forgiveness. Alejandro looked at his mother directly. The same way I should spend whatever time I have left earning yours. Carmen's breath caught. Mine. I know why you did it, Mama. You were protecting what Papa built, protecting our family's future. But I was a coward for letting you make that choice for me. I was 20 years old enough to take responsibility for my actions. Instead, I let you carry the weight of my shame while I pretended to be the victim of circumstances. His mother sank into the room's single plastic chair as if her legs could no longer support her. I thought I was saving you from a mistake that would ruin your life. Instead, you saved me from the most important decision I've ever had to make. And it took 15 years and nearly losing her forever for me to finally make it. Before Carmen could respond, Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway, a distinguished man in his 50s with kind eyes and surgeon's hands. Senor Bosques? I'm here about your daughter. The surgery took 6 hours. Alejandro spent every minute in the hospital's chapel, a small, simple room with wooden pews and a statue of the Virgin of Guadalupe watching over Mexico's suffering. His mother sat beside him, both of them praying to a God they'd largely ignored during their years of wealth and privilege. People came and went, other families dealing with their own medical crises, hospital staff taking quiet moments of reflection, and surprisingly, complete strangers who'd read the story and wanted to show support. An elderly woman from Tepito lit a candle for Sofia's recovery. A young father from Neza knelt beside Alejandro and prayed silently for a girl he'd never met but whose story had touched something deep in his own experience of shame and abandonment. When Dr. Martinez finally emerged, exhaustion and cautious optimism warred in his expression. The surgery was successful, he announced, and Alejandro's knees nearly buckled with relief. We've relieved the pressure on her brain, repaired the internal bleeding. She'll need weeks of recovery, months of rehabilitation, but she's going to live. And with proper care, she should make a full recovery. The crowd that had gathered in the waiting room, family members of other patients, hospital staff, strangers who'd become invested in this story of redemption, erupted in quiet cheers and applause. 3 days later, Sofia opened her eyes. Alejandro was reading to her from Like Water for Chocolate, Isabella's favorite book, one he'd found among the few possessions Sofia kept in a backpack behind a downtown church. When her fingers moved slightly in his hand, he looked up to find those familiar green eyes staring at him with confusion and growing recognition. Papa, she whispered, her voice hoarse from the breathing tube. Yes, Mija. I'm here. I'm finally here. Tears slipped down her bruised cheeks. I saw the news coverage. You told them everything. Everything, he confirmed. The whole ugly truth. Just like you asked. And you lost everything. No, Alejandro said firmly, squeezing her hand. I found everything. I found my daughter. I found my conscience. I found out what it really means to be a father. Sofia studied his face for a long moment, searching for signs of regret or resentment. Finding none, she smiled, the first genuine smile he'd ever seen from her. What happens now? She asked. Now you get better. Now we learn how to be a family. Now we figure out how to build something real together, something that doesn't depend on lies or shame or other people's approval. Through the window, Mexico City stretched out in all its chaotic beauty. Somewhere out there, construction sites that bore the Bosques name were being sold to new owners. Corporate offices were being emptied. A business empire built over 50 years was crumbling into memory. But in this small hospital room, something infinitely more valuable was being born. The possibility of genuine love between a father and daughter who'd found each other through the wreckage of their choices. 6 months later, Alejandro stood outside a small community center in Doctors, the same neighborhood where Isabella had died, where Sofia had lived on the streets, where Mexico's forgotten children struggled for survival every day. The building was modest, nothing like the gleaming towers he'd once constructed, but it buzzed with life and purpose. Centro de Esperanza Isabella Montenegro, read the sign above the door. Free healthcare, education, and housing assistance for families in crisis. Sofia approached from across the street, no longer the hollow-eyed girl he'd first met outside his corporate tower. Proper nutrition, medical care, and above all, the security of being loved had transformed her. She walked with confidence now, her green eyes bright with purpose rather than desperation. Ready for the opening ceremony? She asked, linking her arm through his. Ready, he said, meaning it completely. They'd funded the center with what remained of his personal savings after the business collapse. It wasn't much compared to his former wealth, but it was enough to make a difference. Enough to provide the kind of help that Sophia and Isabella should have received 15 years ago. Inside, dozens of families waited for services. Pregnant teenagers who wouldn't have to choose between love and survival. Children who wouldn't have to live on the streets while their parents worked 3 jobs to afford rent. Mothers who wouldn't have to watch their children die of treatable diseases. As Alejandro cut the ribbon, cameras flashed, not the society photographers who'd once documented his wealth, but journalists covering a different kind of story. A story about redemption, about second chances, about what happened when privilege finally chose to serve purpose. "Any regrets?" a reporter called out. Alejandro looked at his daughter, now his partner in this new mission, and then at his mother, who'd surprised everyone by volunteering to manage the center's administration. Carmen had lost her social standing along with the family fortune, but she'd gained something more valuable, the chance to spend her remaining years serving the people she'd once looked down upon. "Only one," Alejandro replied. "That it took me 15 years to realize that the most important inheritance I could leave my daughter wasn't money or property or a famous name. It was the example of a father who finally chose love over fear." The millionaire who'd begged his homeless daughter to marry him had discovered something more valuable than all his former wealth, that sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what really matters. And in the streets of Mexico City, where poverty and privilege collided every day, one family had finally found their way home to each other, not through marriage or money or the elaborate deceptions of the powerful, but through the simple, revolutionary act of telling the truth. I'm glad you joined me on Alejandro and Sophia's journey from abandonment to redemption, from shame to truth, from wealth without purpose to love with meaning. This story reminds us that the most valuable legacy we can leave isn't measured in pesos or properties, but in the courage to choose what's right over what's easy. Have you ever had to choose between protecting your reputation and protecting someone you love? What does it mean to truly come home to your family? Share your thoughts below. Every story of redemption teaches us something about the power of truth and the possibility of second chances. Thanks for watching till the end. We know you loved this story, and there are many more thrilling ones waiting for you. Just click on the video on your screen to dive into the next chapter.